Big applause, please, for Paul. 10 minutes. Bring it on.
Cool, thanks very much. Well, we've heard from quite a few studios about their games. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the studio, but I'm also going to mention the games that we're working on as well. So, as I mentioned, I'm from Outlier. We're a video game development studio based in Ireland, and Outlier was founded by two experienced entrepreneurs with over 20 years experience in the tech industry. So, myself, I worked at Google for 10 years, and also prior to Outlier, I founded, ran, and then later sold a restaurant business in Ireland. My co-founder, Matt, has years of experience leading teams in Canada's largest gaming and gambling platform. And also, interestingly, he used to work on technical systems for movie sets. So, as an example, he worked on movie sets like Pacific Rim with Guillermo del Toro. I'll give you really the whistle-top tour through where we are and where we're going. And our first game is called This Means Warp. So, This Means Warp is a multiplayer spaceship management roguelite. The game came out in early access earlier this year, and will be coming to PC, Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch next year. So one core pillar of Outlier's game is to develop replayable games and target core gamers who are experienced through a history of games throughout their gaming career, and play on some of the nostalgia factor that might attract some of those gamers. So if you've ever played a game called Faster Than Light, FTL, then this might look quite familiar, but it has the unique component of being multiplayer. So instead of a strategy game where you're managing a crew, each player controls one character and works together as a team, either online, local multiplayer, or single player. So the game is currently rated 87% on Steam. We've built up just shy of 65,000 wish lists for the full release. As I mentioned, it'll be coming in the middle of next year to other platforms as well. If you're a publisher and you're thinking this looks like something you might be interested in, then I'm afraid Jagex beat you to it. So not long after last year's GTR conference, we signed a publishing deal with Jagex. So This Means Warp was designed as a really tightly scoped game that we could deliver for a small budget and potentially attract publishing interest and use as a launch pad for the studio for a second title. But the Jagex deal brought a huge amount of value, and we've got a great relationship with them also going into future titles as well. So not only did the deal support the studio in terms of financing for This Means Warp and beyond, but also had minimum marketing guarantees. Jagex, as you may know, are creators of the RuneScape franchise and are just launching their new launcher, which This Means Warp will be featured on upon full release. They'll be working on the porting, so we're actually completing development of This Means Warp over the next kind of 6 to 8 weeks, and we'll be handing off the porting studio to start work on that. And finally, they also really helped with creative. So we're a very small team and have kind of tightly scoped the game, as I mentioned. And Jagex really helped with some of the character work that you can see here, but also completely overhauled the game's user interface. So we've been integrating that over the last couple of months. You can get a chance to play This Means Warp in the demo area shortly as well. As I mentioned, we're transitioning right now from This Means Warp to our second title. And if I'm honest, we weren't intending to talk about our second title until a little bit later. But the guys so kindly invited us that we thought we'd give you a very sneak peek. I'll talk about that in a second. But before we go into the game, as part of the studio, one thing that we did before This Means Warp, and again in between each game, is really do a deep market analysis about what is not only trending, but a long-term viable prospect for a game. And so if you look at the top 20 monthly games on Steam and how they're grouped by tag, and also like median revenue across the top 1% of games in any genre, you'll find that a number of tags come up again and again as really outperforming others. So there's like simulation, strategy, management, and survival. And that shouldn't come as too much of a surprise to a lot of publishers in the room, but those games, on average, perform very well. So if I was releasing a game today, then I'd probably build a survival city builder. But we also feel that that particular genre has been really, there's a load of great games coming out right now. And so when we're starting to work on a project, we're a little bit behind the curve. So we felt that the strategy simulation management area is a potentially really promising one, but that specific niche is overserved. So instead, decided to focus on the kind of simulation and management aspects that perhaps isn't as saturated in recent times. Again, kind of playing on the nostalgia of Bullfrog games and others from the past. So our second game will be a amusement park builder game set on Mars, where players play as a Martian, attracting Martian guests to a human-themed amusement park. Before I go any further, I know we've got some potentially press and influencers in the room. We've got ongoing contractual negotiations here, so I really please request that we keep this inside the room. This is strictly confidential. But we've also just agreed terms with the licensing director for Mars Attacks. So Mars Attacks.
Pictures. No pictures.
No pictures. Thank you. Don't want to arrest that man. Mars Attacks will be coming to early access in 2024. And so in the game, players play as the Martians building human-themed amusement parks with themed enclosures from humans abducted throughout history. And so it's the player's objective to build a thriving tourist business for Martians curious about humans, while also managing escapees and the problems that humans might cause and the havoc they might create within the park. So from a gameplay perspective, you can kind of think of it like Roller Coaster Tycoon meets Prison Architect, or maybe something like Jurassic Park, but with humans instead of dinosaurs. In terms of where we're targeting, we're currently a small team, but we're going to be recruiting next year, so we're aiming to hire between 4 or 5 people next year, and then every subsequent year as well. By scoping This Means Warp so small, then the intention for the studio is not only to grow rapidly, but profitably. So for Mars Attacks, we're aiming at the kind of III level. We'd love to have, a Prison Architect, a 2 Point Hospital, or a Planet Zoo, but realistically, I think there's a real space to compete in the $5 to $10 million range. A game that's done that really recently in a similar approach might be Starship Troopers Terran Command, where it's a small team using a similar IP, really executing well on an established genre with some unique mechanics to bring a twist to the formula. So that graph on the right is essentially what it would look like for Outlier's cash flow over the next few years. In a couple of years' time, we're also planning to potentially continue expanding the team by diversifying into working on 2 simultaneous titles. So as a developer, we bring the community on very, very early on into development and build the community alongside the game. And that means that we go through alpha, beta, early access, and full release, as we are doing with This Means Warp. So the plan would be to continue that approach through subsequent games. In addition to Mars Attacks, we're currently putting together a seed funding round for Q1 of next year. And we're looking for an investor to join existing investments. We've lined up about, just over $500,000 already, and looking for a final investor to join that round for somewhere between $200,000 and $500,000 at a $3 million valuation. In terms of what the company is, what you're buying into, the company currently has about $250,000 as a war chest from This Means Warp, and that's before royalties. So we're expecting royalties to start in October, after the game comes out in the middle of the year, from console platforms, and that 250 also excludes everything that we raised from the funding round as well. For those not familiar with investing in Ireland, then it's kind of mentioned earlier that some countries are more attractive than others, and Ireland is really transforming its video game industry, which is in its infancy this year, with a load of incentives to bring people in. So it's a fantastic place, not only for government funding, but also the 32% tax credit that's just been announced. And also it's part of the European rounds of grants and things that are available. So if you're a publisher that's interested potentially in talking about Mars Attacks a little bit further down the line, or an investor who might be interested in coming on board for this round, then I'm going to be around demoing This Means Warp. So please come and say hello. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot.